Hello guys. Tonight, we travel far back in time, to the soft hush of waves on the Atlantic coast, to the creaking of timbered ships and the uncertain breath of a land barely known. Tonight, we walk together into the first cold, fateful winter at Jamestown. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there for you? I always find it comforting to imagine this quiet, connected web of sleepy minds, all across the globe. Leave a comment below with your location and local time. I really do want to know. Now, take a deep breath. Feel the heaviness of your body melt into the bed. Let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders. Pull your blanket a little closer, and imagine yourself not as who you are now, but as someone stepping off a wooden ship in the year 1607. You're seasick. Your clothes are damp, salty, and stiff. The Atlantic crossing was long, nearly 5 months, and every morning for the past week you've woken to the scent of mouldy biscuit, sour water, and the unrelenting groan of the waves. Now you step off the ship onto soft, unfamiliar soil. Virginia, or at least that's what you've been told this place is called. You are among the first permanent English settlers in North America. There are about 100 of you. Gentlemen, labourers, soldiers, and a scattering of craftsmen. No women yet, no families, just men. Mostly strangers to one another. The date is May 13th, 1607. The day is warm, the sun strong. Mosquitoes rise in clouds from the marshes nearby. You swat them from your face, but they're relentless. Before you, rising in the mist from the James River, is a patch of land chosen for its defensibility. It is surrounded on 3 sides by water, giving the illusion of safety. But you don't yet realise it is also a trap. The water is brackish, the land is swampy, and no clean spring is in sight. You came here because of a promise whispered through crowded London taverns, that the new world is rich with gold and untouched bounty, that you, yes, you, could return wealthy, perhaps even titled. But as you look around at the tangled trees, the reeds, the biting flies, the doubts begin to flicker. A captain named Christopher Newport commands your voyage. He's already preparing to return to England, promising more supplies later. But the one who truly stands out is John Smith, a soldier of fortune, young, brash, opinionated, and deeply mistrusted by the upper-class gentlemen who think of him as nothing more than a mutinous commoner. Yet, you find yourself drawn to him. He seems to understand that this place is not what they were told, that it's not gold in the river, it's salt and death. Your group begins to unload supplies, crates of tools, flour, salted pork, gunpowder. But there is no plan, no real understanding of the seasons here, or the soil. Some men argue over where to build the palisade walls, others retreat into the ships to avoid the labour. You sleep that night on the ground. The stars above are unfamiliar, and you can hear strange bird calls from the woods. Insects crawl over your bedding. The darkness feels deeper here, thicker than it did in England. You wonder, just briefly, if you've made a terrible mistake, but you silence the thought. It's only the first day. There is time. What you don't know yet is that the clock has already started ticking, that the real danger won't be the voyage, or even the natives whom you barely see in these first days. The real danger is the land itself, the quiet, subtle poisoning of brackish water, the lack of food, the oppressive humid heat that gives way to biting cold. Winter is coming, and most of you won't live to see the spring. But for now, you close your eyes beneath the makeshift canvas awning. The river laps gently against the shore. A warm breeze whispers through the trees, and above all you feel one thing most of all: alone. The first weeks pass in a kind of daze. You find yourself moving through long humid days, where time blurs with heat and sweat and the constant presence of biting insects. The settlement, still just rough palisade walls and half-framed huts, grows slowly, unevenly. Men argue over tools, over responsibilities, over rations. The gentlemen, unused to labour, often refuse to work at all, clutching their personal chests of books and silver spoons, as if this were still London. They spend hours debating matters of rank and status, even here, where trees outnumber people and the walls offer little more than the illusion of the order. A carpenter cuts beams for a communal storehouse, but already you can see how food disappears faster than anyone expected. The salted meat, biscuit, and dried peas, spoiled from the journey or hoarded in secret, are not enough. The drinking water, drawn from the river at high tide, is murky, tinged with salt, and filled with things too small to see. Still you drink it, and so do the others. You try not to think about the stomach cramps, or the way some men lie curled in their bedding, sweating and pale. You don't know how to hunt the animals here, not yet. The English longbow is nearly useless in these forests, and the guns take too long to load, too much powder, too little reliability. You do not know the names of the plants or which berries are safe. Everything is unfamiliar. The trees are taller than any you've seen in England, thick-trunked and moss-hung, crowding close at the edges of the camp. The woods are not silent, always alive with sounds you cannot identify. One man swears he saw a bear. Another claims wolves circled the settlement after dusk. You see neither, but in the dark it's not difficult to believe. At first, contact with the local tribes is cautious, almost polite. The Powhatan people send a small group toward the edge of the settlement bearing food, corn, venison and berries in baskets. You watch the exchange from behind the half-finished walls, noting how the English guards keep their muskets in hand even as they smile. A few words are traded, some awkward gifts returned. But there's little trust. The English assume superiority, certain they can claim land and obedience through ceremony and God's blessing. The Powhatan, ancient to this land, do not share their view. To them, you are something in between a curiosity and a threat. They are watching. John Smith begins to emerge as the only one with any grasp of reality. He works beside the labourers, teaches the fancier men to thatch roofs, digs trenches when others refuse. He has survived wars in Europe, been taken prisoner, escaped again. He knows that this land won't bend to noble titles. You notice how often others come to him for advice, even while pretending not to respect him. You find yourself doing the same. In the evenings, when you sit with your knees drawn to your chest beside the fire, you listen to him talk about the ways the Powhatan live, how they move with the seasons, how they fish, how they survive. You begin to understand that they know something you do not. The days stretch on. The humidity thickens. The air is wet with the breath of the marsh. You begin to feel it in your chest, that heaviness that makes it harder to breathe, harder to think. Some men develop fevers. A few wander off into the woods and don't return. You begin to hear coughing at night, dry, persistent. It echoes in the dark like distant footsteps. The sick are laid in the shade under the trees, away from the others. There are no doctors, only guesswork and prayer. You help bury the first man by mid-June. He's wrapped in a blanket and laid in a shallow grave just beyond the wall. No marker, no time for one. The stores are shrinking. The promised resupply ship is overdue. Hunting has yielded little. Fishing is inconsistent. The men grow quieter, more watchful. You begin to notice how food disappears overnight, how tools are left behind and then lost. Whispers of mutiny drift through camp, low and sharp. There are threats, arrests, beatings. Trust becomes something you ration more carefully than meat. Yet the sun keeps rising. The birds keep calling. There are still days when it feels like something might work, when a deer is caught or a few baskets of corn are traded and cooked. Those days are rare, but they're enough to keep hope alive, even thinly. You watch the walls rise taller, the roofs patched with bark and grass. You hear talk of planting crops, though it is already too late in the season. Still, men speak of future harvests and homes and churches, as if saying the words might summon them into reality. You try to believe it. You try to forget the smell of the river at low tide, the bitter taste of the water in your mouth, the way your hands tremble when you wake. No one says it out loud yet, but you can feel it. The land is pushing back. By July the river smells like rot. At first you thought it was the fish or the tide or the barrels of spoiled meat emptied into the marsh. But the stench doesn't leave, even when the wind shifts. It clings to everything. Your clothes, your hair, your throat. Some say it's just the summer heat. Others whisper that the ground itself is sick. You believe both. The camp is changing. Each day brings a new illness, a new grave. Men you nodded to just days before are now silent shapes beneath the dirt, buried quickly, without ceremony. You've helped dig too many graves to remember names. The soil is shallow, thick with roots, and the insects are bold. The dead do not stay long beneath the earth. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of fabric torn open by animals, or see a foot exposed where rain has washed the topsoil away. You try not to look. Your own hands have begun to blister from the work, raw from ropes and shovels. At night, your fingers twitch as if still gripping a handle. Sleep comes in short moments, interrupted by coughing, yours and others. The coughs are dry at first, then wet, thick with something dark. You no longer question the source of your fever. Everyone has one now. The air is full of it. Some call it the bloody flux. Others say it's just the heat. You know it's more than that. There is something in the water, in the very breath of this place. The river, once shimmering and full of promise, is now a thing to fear. It rises and falls with the tide, flooding the marsh, then retreating and leaving behind swirls of green scum and writhing insects. You still have to drink from it. There is no other source. You try to draw water at low tide to boil it when there's time, but more often you drink it straight from the bucket, too thirsty to care. And then the cramps return, twisting your gut like rope drawn tight. You watch men lose weight quickly, their eyes sunken, lips cracked and bleeding. Salt rations are nearly gone. Bread is infested with beetles. The peas are hard and bitter even when boiled. You chew anyway. There are days when you chew bark or grass just to feel something in your mouth. And still, hunger grows like a second body inside you, thin, cold, and hollow. The hierarchy begins to shift. Titles lose their meaning. The gentlemen who refuse to work are now the weakest. One by one, they fade. Some try to assert command, but their words no longer carry weight. You watch them sit in silence, backs against the unfinished walls, their hands trembling, voices weak. It is the labourers, the strong-backed men who once bowed to them, who now run the camp, or what's left of it. John Smith becomes more vocal, his warnings sharpen. He speaks of rationing, of punishment for hoarding, of alliances with the Powhatan. His voice cuts through the heat like a blade. He challenges the old leaders openly now. You sense both fear and relief in the camp. Someone is taking control finally, though whether that will save any of you remains unclear. Smith argues with the council almost daily, pressing for trade, for change, for reason. You hear him late at night by the fires, his voice low, worn. He is not invincible. Even he coughs now. In August, 2 ships arrive unexpectedly, bringing a few more men and meagre supplies. Hope flickers through the camp for the first time in weeks. You think maybe things will turn. Maybe this is the beginning of the settlement taking root. But the new arrivals are thin, pale, and just as unprepared as you were. They bring no women, no children, only more mouths to feed, more fevered bodies to tend. Whatever they carried from England was already spoiled by the time they landed. One man brings letters from home. You hold a crumpled sheet in your hands, sent from a brother you barely remember. His words are cheerful, proud. He imagines you standing in a field of gold under a wide blue sky with a new house behind you and land stretching for miles. You fold the letter in silence and tuck it into your shirt. You won't write back. The days are shorter now. Not cold yet, but the sun sets earlier and the breeze has changed. A different scent rides the wind, something sharper, cleaner than the sour heat of July. It makes you uneasy. The elders say winter comes fast in this place. You wonder what that means here, where even summer nearly killed you. You begin to see movement beyond the trees. Not animals, but people. Powhatan hunters, scouts, watching the camp from a distance. They do not approach. You do not wave. There is a truce of sorts, a silence with teeth. You know they are waiting too, watching to see if you'll survive the turn of the season. You begin to ration your breath. Every step outside the palisade is a risk. Every mouthful of water a gamble. You feel as if you're not building a colony anymore, but defending a last flickering hope that something here was ever meant to grow. September arrives with no ceremony. There is no harvest. Nothing grows in the clearing where the crops were meant to be. The ground is too sandy, too choked with roots and shadow. The seeds planted late in the summer, English varieties unfamiliar with this land, never took. A few weak stalks of corn stand in the hard soil like cracked spears. You find one ear, small and patchy, and boil it to mush. It tastes like ash. What was once called Jamestown is no longer a place of plans and ambition. It is something more desperate now, a cluster of weather-darkened shelters and scavenged tents, hidden behind rotting wooden walls. The palisade, once the pride of the camp, leans where the stakes have warped in the heat. Vines creep through the gaps. You patch them with whatever you can, strips of cloth, driftwood, even the rib bones of animals long since eaten. Nothing holds. Rain seeps through. The animals are gone. You haven't seen a deer in weeks. Even the raccoons and possums that sometimes scuttled near the riverbank have vanished. The Powhatan have pulled back too. Where they once came with food or cautious greetings, now there is only distance. You suspect they know what is coming. They've lived through winters here. You haven't. The men grow quiet. Those who were once loudest, the ones who preached about wealth and dominion and providence, now speak only to themselves, muttering into their blankets, or praying under their breath. You avoid them. Madness is another sickness here, one that spreads when you hear it too long. Instead, you focus on the work. You dig latrines further out. You boil every bucket of water twice. You patch shoes with rope and bark. You keep moving, because stillness is dangerous. Stillness is when your mind turns inward, and there is little comfort to be found there. The food stores are gone. What remains is hidden in secret caches, tucked into tree hollows and under loose floorboards. You've seen men fight over the heel of a biscuit. One night, someone sneaks into the communal shelter and steals a sack of flour no larger than a fist. No one confesses. John Smith orders the shelters searched. He finds nothing. The thief is among you, but hunger protects him more than walls ever could. You remember how the older men used to talk about winter in England. They spoke of frozen roads and fireside meals, of frost on the panes and the warmth of ale. You remember it too, muddy streets, heavy coats, the sharpness of snow in the air. But this place is different. Here, the cold doesn't come in suddenly. It creeps, like a wet breath behind the trees. It lingers in the early mornings when your hands refuse to move, and in the evenings when the wind off the river carries something brittle. It smells not of ice, but of rot slowly hardening. You wrap yourself in a patchwork of cloaks and furs. You sleep beside the fire when there is wood enough for one. Mostly there isn't. The trees around the camp have already been stripped, the lower branches broken off, the bark carved away. You remember the sound of axes constantly ringing when you arrived. Now it's quiet. Disease no longer surprises anyone. It is as common as breathing. A man falls ill and no one moves to help. You all know the signs, the shaking hands, the red eyes, the black stains in the corners of the mouth. Fever, dysentery, salt poisoning, it no longer matters what to call it. You begin to mark the living by absence. He is gone, you say. He was here yesterday. No one asks where. Smith is everywhere now. He limps from shelter to shelter, checking the stores, ordering new watchposts, demanding wood be gathered, water boiled. He speaks of holding out. Just a few more months, he says. Reinforcements will come. A new supply ship will break through the storm season. But you hear the fatigue in his voice. You see how his shoulders sag when he thinks no one is watching. One night you see him alone by the river, throwing something into the current. You can't tell if it's a letter or a prayer. He stays there for a long time. That same week, a fight breaks out between two men over a dead rat. One found it near the latrines and tried to keep it hidden, but the other smelled it cooking. They wrestled in the mud until one cracked the other's head against the palisade post. The rat burned to ash in the fire, uneaten. There is a list now, an official record scratched onto a board nailed to the central post. Each morning, a name is struck through. You try not to look at it, but every day your eyes go there, searching for familiar letters. You wonder who will strike through yours, and whether anyone will say it out loud. The days continue, the wind grows sharper, the firewood runs low. Someone suggests tearing down one of the shelters for fuel. No one disagrees. The roof comes off within the hour. You watch it burn that night and feel a strange warmth in your chest. Not comfort, just a flicker of survival, flickering and faint like the embers themselves. By mid-October, the frost begins to settle across the grass before dawn. Not yet snow, but a pale shimmer that vanishes with the morning sun. You wake with your cloak stiff from dampness, your fingers slow to move. The ground, once so soft and slick with summer decay, has hardened. The wind comes in longer, colder gusts now, moving straight through the cracks in the walls, through your clothing, through your chest. It is a different kind of discomfort, less violent than fever or hunger, but more constant. It lingers in the bones. Inside the camp, the pace has slowed. There is little left to do. The planting season is long past. The supplies are nearly gone. Only survival remains. You repair your boots for the third time with scraps of old leather and twine. You reinforce your shelter walls with mud and strips of bark. Nothing lasts long. Each night more of the settlement disappears into smoke and ash as walls are torn down to feed the fire. There are fewer torches now, less shouting. The noise of work has faded into the silence of waiting. The rats are gone too, not because they left, but because they were taken. Everyone trapped, skinned, and boiled into something that barely counts as food. You ate your first rat 2 weeks ago. There was a moment of hesitation, the dry fur between your fingers, the sharp stink of burning hair. But the moment passed. Hunger decided for you. That night, you slept with a pit in your stomach. Not from guilt, but from knowing it wouldn't be enough. The men no longer speak of gold. You haven't heard the word profit in over a month. The London company's promises feel like something from another life, a joke told in poor taste. One man still keeps a pouch of gold coins hidden in his chest. You saw him counting them, quietly, beside a fire made from the bones of a dismantled roof. You didn't ask why. There's nothing to buy. Relations with the Powhatan have broken down almost entirely. Where once there were cautious exchanges of food, now there is only suspicion, and at times, arrows. You hear them at night, soft impacts against tree trunks, sudden rustling in the brush. The lookouts have stopped venturing far from the walls. Smith insists they are watching, not attacking, but the difference grows smaller with each passing day. The food they once shared is no longer offered. They have pulled back into the forest, into winter camps where they will wait and see what's left of you in the spring. Inside the fort, your circle of trust narrows. You no longer speak freely around others. Theft is common now, not just of food, but of firewood, tools, even clothing. One morning you wake to find your second cloak missing, stolen while you slept. You know who took it. You say nothing. You simply take someone else's a day later. There are no laws anymore, not really. The orders posted by Smith and the council are read, ignored and forgotten. Authority survives only through proximity and strength. Smith grows harsher. He no longer pleads. He commands. Rations are distributed with guards present. Punishments are swift. A man who stole from the communal storehouse is tied to a post and left overnight. In the morning he's gone. No one asks where. You sense the tension inside Smith too, the way his patience has burned down to embers. He limps more now, slower than before, though he still works harder than any of the others. You respect him, though you also fear what he might become if things get worse. He's keeping the shape of order alive, but just barely. And things are getting worse. The salt sickness has returned. It begins the same way it always does, with thirst that never ends. You drink from the river, from puddles, from water that tastes of rust and algae. You drink until your belly feels tight, but still, the dryness clings to your mouth and throat. Then the cramps start. You see others stumbling out of the shelters, clutching their sides, eyes glazed. Some vomit blood. Others collapse entirely. There's nothing to be done. You've learned not to help. Not because you don't want to, but because there is nothing you can give. That week 3 more die. One is the young boy who came with the Cooper, barely 16. He hadn't spoken in days. You remember seeing him curled in the corner, staring at the wall. They buried him near the southern edge in the softest earth they could find. You helped. It took 2 hours. You begin to speak less. It's easier. The voice dries out when you use it too much, and there's little to say. A few men still talk of rescue, of ships coming in the spring, bringing food and fresh settlers. You've stopped listening. Spring is a word you can't afford to believe in yet. The nights are the worst. The firewood burns faster in the cold, and the darkness feels heavier. The stars above are sharp, unfamiliar. Sometimes you see lights far beyond the river, faint flickering signals from other fires deeper in the forest. You do not know if they are friend or threat. Either way, you stay inside the wall. Your skin is changing. Dry, cracked, grey at the knuckles. Your nails have begun to loosen. You remember reading once that scurvy does this, that the body begins to eat itself when it has nothing else. You think about oranges. The memory makes your stomach ache. There is talk of rationing leather, boiling belts and shoes into a broth to stretch the last sacks of grain. You do not argue. You sharpen your knife with care. When you cut into the heel of your boot and place it in the pot, the smell is something you'll never forget. Burned oil, wet dirt, and the memory of better meals. But you eat it. Everyone eats it. By November, the fort is silent in a way you've never known silence before. Not the silence of peace or of early morning stillness, but something deeper, something hollowed out. It is the absence of voices that once surrounded you, the absence of footsteps where men used to pass. The settlement is quieter now because there are fewer of you left. Each day begins with a head count not out of habit but necessity. There are no more than 40 men standing. At least 25 have died since the end of summer. A few slipped away in the night and were never seen again. No one speaks their names aloud anymore. It's as though the act of remembering could draw some invisible hand to strike you next. You've grown used to the taste of boiled bark and shoe leather, to the feel of cold dirt under your cheek, to the way the wind now cuts through your coat as if it were gauze. You've grown used to hunger, at least the early stages of it. That sharp, hollow gnawing inside you has dulled. It's no longer hunger as you once understood it. It's something quieter now, something that presses rather than stabs. It's a weight in your limbs, a numbness in your thoughts. You can feel it slowing your blood. One of the men begins to talk in circles, repeating the names of ships that were supposed to return with supplies. The Susan Constant, the Discovery. He says them like prayers. Then he forgets what he said. He asks if the fire has been lit, though it's burning right in front of him. A few nights later he walks into the river. No one stops him. The fort itself is crumbling at the edges. The palisade walls lean where rot has taken the base posts. The gate drags in the dirt when you try to move it, swollen from weeks of rain and frost. The mud paths between shelters have hardened into uneven channels. No one bothers to fix anything now unless it poses a direct danger, and even then, only if they can find the strength. Your skin itches constantly. Beneath your layers, red sores open where the damp has never dried. You no longer remember when you last washed. You don't think anyone does. The air inside the shelters is heavy with breath and damp clothing, with smoke from wet wood and the unwashed bodies of desperate men. You keep your own distance when you can, sleep curled beneath a half-rotted fir, near the corner where the wind sneaks in through the boards. It's cold, but at least it's your own air. You begin to recognise the smells of death before you see it. The scent is sweet at first, strangely so, before it turns sour and metallic. One morning you find a man stiff in his bed, curled like a child, his eyes sunken deep into his skull. You do not scream, you simply get a shovel. The earth is too hard to dig through now, so the graves become shallower, the coverings more hurried. Some are no longer buried at all. You tell yourself that it's not your job to decide where one body lies. That is a mercy you can no longer afford to provide. Some begin to whisper about escape. Not to England, but deeper inland, away from the river, into the woods where the Powhatan vanished weeks ago. They speak of warmer places, of game still living, of hidden springs untouched by salt. A few even pack for it. Small bundles of dried roots, knives, blankets. You hear them leave one night, before dawn. You never see them again. John Smith tries to hold what's left together. He stands every morning by the central post calling for rations, for sentries, for fire patrol. He says the same things, in the same tone, with the same resolve. But you've noticed his hands tremble now. His coat hangs from him like wet cloth. His cheek is marked by a deep scratch that no one has explained. He is thinner, his eyes dart more. He does not sleep much, if at all. You overhear him arguing with one of the remaining councilmen, what's left of the old leadership. They whisper about treason, about theft of supplies, about what will happen if spring does not come soon. You know better than to ask questions. The weather turns again. A storm comes up from the south. Rain first, cold and fat and heavy, then wind that groans through the trees and batters what little is left standing. Your shelter loses part of its roof. You spend the night holding the edge of a blanket over the hole, trying to keep the warmth in, the water out. You fail at both. After the storm, the river floods the lower edge of the fort. The pit where waste was buried overflows. The smell lingers in the air for days. You gag every time you walk past. No one does anything about it. There is no strength left to act. The hunger becomes different now. You no longer feel it as emptiness, but as a fog. You walk more slowly. You forget where you are going. One afternoon you look down at your hands and do not recognise them. The knuckles are swollen, the fingertips dark. You wonder how long it's been since you last saw your reflection. There is one morning when you wake and feel warmth on your face. Sunlight, real sunlight, for the first time in weeks. It lights the inside of your shelter with a faint gold. For a moment you believe that something has changed, that maybe the worst is past. But when you step outside you see the frost sparkling across the ground, the mist lifting off the river like breath, and you know it is not spring. It is only a lull. Winter still waits. By late November, the line between survival and instinct begins to fade. The fire is the only thing that matters now. Everything else has collapsed around it. You measure your life by how long it takes the last log to turn black. You count your nights by the number of embers left in the ashes. There are no candles anymore, no oil for lamps. The moon and flame are all that light the interior of your shelter now. Some nights you let the fire die, conserving what little fuel remains, and curl beside the stones trying to hold on to their warmth, even as the cold creeps in around your ribs. The walls of the fort no longer feel like protection. They only trap the cold. You see ice forming on the inside of the roof above your head. It glitters in the morning like frost-covered glass. You reach to touch it once and your skin comes away raw. The wind sneaks through gaps between the planks and whistles across your face as you sleep. Even when the air is still, your bones feel brittle. Like the cold is inside you now, not outside. By now, even the strongest among you are weakened. Your legs cramp when you stand too quickly. Your knees buckle without warning. One man faints while gathering firewood near the northern wall. He does not wake. You find him with his eyes open, mouth slightly parted, arms still clutched around a bundle of dry twigs. You use them in the fire that night. Some men have begun to steal from the dead. Quietly, carefully. Boots are pulled from stiffened feet. Belts, cloaks, tools, anything left behind is fair game. It's no longer about greed, it's just necessity. You've taken things too, more than once. A blanket, a spoon, a fur-lined glove. You always feel a moment of hesitation, but never guilt. The ones you take from will not need them again. The storehouse, once locked and guarded, now stands open. It is mostly empty. Inside are broken barrels, a few rusted nails, a half-filled sack of spoiled rye that smells of mildew and decay. John Smith passes through it each morning, checking the corners as if expecting a miracle to grow there overnight. You watch him from a distance. He walks with a slight limp now, his left leg dragging behind just slightly. He never mentions it. Then, one morning, a whisper moves through the camp. Not in panic, not in rage, just a quiet, wordless confirmation of something too awful to be said directly. A man has disappeared. Not from escape, not from fever. Simply gone. His shelter left undisturbed, his name scratched from the count board, and later, a knife found buried in the ash heap, marked with something dark, too dark to be mud. You know what it means. You don't want to. But you do. No one says the word. Not yet. But the knowledge spreads faster than fire. You feel it in the way men glance at one another now. How no one sits with their back turned. How every pair of eyes seems to linger too long. You wonder if it's already happened before. You wonder if you would know. You wonder what part of a man would vanish first. The next day, Smith calls a gathering, his voice still firm but his face drawn. He speaks of theft, of punishment, of maintaining order, but he avoids what everyone is thinking. You look around at the others, hollow faces, chapped lips, fingers wrapped in rags. Not one of them looks shocked. Not one. That night someone tries to boil bones. Not animal bones, not fresh ones. You hear the fire crackle differently, the way it does when something oily burns. You smell it and feel your stomach twist, not from disgust, but from a kind of recognition. You do not go closer. The journal entries, those that still exist, begin to trail off around this time. Even those who tried to keep records lose the will to write. Words mean little now, dates slip away. All that matters is the fire, the body, the cold. You stop thinking in days. You start thinking in nights survived. You lose another friend the following week. One of the quieter men, a thatcher who once talked of sending for his family when the settlement was stable. You find him curled in his bed, his mouth open, eyes closed as if dreaming. You do not cry. There is no strength for it. You simply wrap him in what's left of his own blanket and carry him toward the edge of the fort. The ground is too hard to dig. You pile stones over him instead. It is all you can offer. And then one night, something shifts. You wake to shouting. Not alarm. Anger. A fight has broken out between two of the guards, near the watch post closest to the river. You rise too slowly to see the beginning, but when you get there, one man is on the ground, and the other is bleeding from the hand. The argument was over a fish trap, something crude, left over from warmer months. The trap was empty. Both men had risked the river for nothing, but still, they fought. You can see it now, clearly. Even illusions are worth killing for. Afterward, Smith stands alone beside the gate. He doesn't speak. He looks out across the trees toward the dark outline of the forest, toward whatever waits beyond. You wonder what he sees, what he hopes for, whether he's given up hope entirely. The next morning you eat nothing at all. The last scraps of grain have turned green. You boil water and sip it like broth. Your hands shake. Your mouth tastes of smoke. You no longer dream when you sleep, just blackness. Your name is still not on the list of the dead, but you know it will be. By December, no one uses the word colony anymore. The word is too large, too proud. It suggests something still in motion, still growing. Jamestown is not growing. It is shrinking. And the men inside it are no longer settlers, or builders, or Englishmen. They are simply survivors, or trying to be. The frost now lingers all day. You begin to forget what the world looked like before it turned white and grey. The trees no longer whisper in the breeze. They creak like old ships straining against frozen waves. The river moves more slowly, sluggish with cold. The edges of the bank crack and shine. When the wind comes off the water, it carries a sharpness that bites deep into the folds of your skin. You feel it along your jawline, inside your sleeves, behind your teeth. You've stopped speaking unless you must. Everyone has. There is a thin kind of etiquette now, an unspoken rule that wasting breath is worse than wasting food. Most of what's left of your energy goes into the fire, gathering wood, breaking it into pieces, feeding the coals just enough to make it last. Fire is the only constant now. It is both company and guardian. Men sit beside it with blank faces, their backs hunched, their hands stretched toward the light with cracked fingernails and knotted joints. There is no food, not a little food, not hidden stores, not secret caches waiting for spring, just nothing. The flour, spoiled months ago, has been gone for weeks. The salted meat vanished before frost touched the walls. The dried peas and beans, if they were ever real, are no longer spoken of. You have chewed leather, sucked on bark, boiled pine needles for bitterness mistaken as nourishment. Even the shoes are gone now, burned or eaten. The rats are gone, the dogs, the horses. Even the birds that once roosted on the rooftops have vanished, as if they too understood what was coming. So now, when someone dies, the response is no longer mourning, it's calculation. You don't want to admit it, you don't want to think about it, but it's there, in the eyes of the men who sit near the fire too long, in the way they glance at the body before covering it, in the silence that follows, deeper than before. Once you would have wept. Now you wonder how long the body will stay untouched. Sometimes you wonder what you would do if it were you, starving, surrounded by the dead. What you might take, what part might come first, and whether you'd speak of it afterward, or just sit quietly and pretend. You still haven't crossed that line, but others have. You're sure of it. You've seen things missing, and not just clothing or knives. You've seen the way fire pits are covered afterward, the carefulness of some men when they cook at night, the tight ring they form around their meagre meals. You've seen the way they turn their backs to the fire when others approach. The journal that survives, one of the few, calls it the starving time. It is a name given later, after the frost melts, after the horror has passed into history. But to you, in the middle of it, there is no poetry in the phrase. It is not dramatic. It is not even a warning. It is simply the truth. You are starving, and time is the only thing that continues. At night, you no longer feel cold in the same way. It becomes a strange floating warmth, just under your skin. You've heard of this. The last trick the body plays, the warmth before the end. You wrap yourself tighter, but it doesn't help. The fire isn't close enough, you're always too far from it. You begin to pray, not out loud but silently inside your head. The prayers come without shape or scripture, not the polished phrases you once learned as a child, but guttural things. Please, really, muttered names, bits of songs you half remember from long ago. You pray for spring, you pray for a ship, you pray for meat, even though you no longer care what kind. Sometimes you pray for sleep, deep sleep, no waking. John Smith grows more distant. He appears at odd hours, walks the camp alone. His face is drawn tight, eyes shadowed. You know he eats no more than you do, but still, he moves. He speaks when needed. He keeps a ledger, though fewer names are left to record. He no longer gives speeches. He no longer promises relief. He just checks the wall, watches the river, and waits. One morning, a group of 5 is found huddled together in a collapsed shelter. They froze sometime during the night. No fire, no blanket, just one another. One man's eyes are open, his mouth too. You help move the bodies, but the ground is too hard to bury them. They are wrapped and left beside the others, beneath a canvas sheet weighted with bricks. You cannot look at them again. You catch yourself counting the days. You stop when you realise you don't know the number anymore. You try marking the wooden frame of your shelter with a rock, one scratch each sunrise, but soon the scratches blend together. You abandon the wall and just close your eyes when the light fades, open them when it returns. There are only 38 men left. Of the original 104, more than 60 have died, and there are still months of cold ahead. Somewhere, far off, you think of England. Not the one you left, not the smoky streets or cramped alleys, but the one you invented in your head. The warm one, the green one, the place where food was always enough and life never felt this thin. That England never existed, but you still miss it. You lie awake that night and wonder, not whether you'll survive, but how long you'll be aware that you won't. By the final days of December, a dullness settles over the fort. Not quiet. There's still movement, the crackle of firewood, the shuffle of boots across frozen ground, but a mental dullness, a kind of emptiness that spreads through the mind like fog. You feel it in yourself. Thoughts take longer. Memories skip like stones on ice, disappearing before they settle. You look at a man you've known for months and can't recall his name. You forget the date, the season, the words for things. You forget to speak altogether. There is no longer a clear difference between the living and the dead. Some men remain upright, sitting near the fire or moving through the snow-dusted paths of the fort, but they do not speak. They do not eat. They move like ghosts, faces hollowed, eyes unfocused. You nod when you pass them, but they do not see you. Days later, they are gone. The sickness returns in waves. Men collapse suddenly, eyes rolled back, jaws clenched. Some recover, most do not. There is no pattern, no warning. One man vomits blood into the snow, staining it black before falling still. Another clings to life for days, murmuring nonsense beneath a filthy blanket. His words mean nothing, but the tone is always the same, pleading. Then he too is silent. You stop reacting. There's no room for grief anymore, no energy for surprise. One afternoon, you are sent beyond the walls to gather fallen branches. You carry a small hatchet, though it's mostly for show. There are no wolves this close to the settlement, and even if there were, you're too slow to run. You work through the undergrowth slowly, your fingers stiff, breath like steam in the air. You hear footsteps behind you. You don't turn around. It's another man from the fort. You recognize his face vaguely, one of the Dutch labourers. He looks at you too long, says nothing, just lingers. There is something in his eyes that unsettles you. Not malice, not desperation. Something quieter. Calculation. He watches your hands. You grip your bundle tighter and move on. He doesn't follow. Back in the fort, there's tension now that wasn't there before. Not just the hunger, but something deeper. Mistrust. Fear. Men sleep with their tools beside them. Knives, axes, lengths of iron sharpened to points. You do too. Not out of paranoia, but out of realism. It's not thieves you worry about. It's survivors. Another body is found near the edge of the palisade, buried under a shallow heap of snow, stripped of everything. Even the teeth are missing. No one speaks of it directly, but Smith calls a meeting. His voice is harsh. There will be no cannibalism, he says. It is forbidden. It is against God. He says it as if the line has not already been crossed, but he does not ask questions. He does not demand answers. He simply says it and walks away. You wonder whether he's seen what you have. You wonder how far he's willing to go to keep what's left of order from dissolving completely. The fort is smaller now, not in size but in presence. Shelters have collapsed or been burned for firewood. One of the old storehouses stands half-gutted, its roof peeled back by wind, its floor used for kindling. The walls are grey with ash. A few men still make patrols at night, more out of habit than need. There is no longer anything to defend, and yet, despite everything, some still speak of hope. That spring is coming, that a ship must arrive, that England will not abandon its first permanent colony. The word permanent feels ironic now. Nothing here is permanent except death. Still, you want to believe. You pretend sometimes. You look downriver and imagine sails. You even think you see them once far away in the mist, but it's just a trick of the eyes. Nothing comes. Inside the walls, discipline continues to unravel. Someone steals firewood from the communal pile. Smith orders an inspection but finds nothing. You know who took it. So does everyone. But no one says a word. He needed it more than most. The rules are shifting again. Survival makes its own laws. A few men disappear into the woods. No announcement, no goodbye. They take whatever they have left. Flint, threadbare cloaks, knives that won't hold an edge. They walk beyond the palisade and vanish. Some believe they're trying to reach the Powhatan, hoping for mercy. Others believe they've simply gone off to die alone. You do not judge them. You think about following. You think about staying. Both feel the same now. Your body is changing again. You've stopped feeling hunger the way you used to. Instead, it's a dull heat in your stomach, a burning like coal pressed against the gut. Your limbs feel heavy. You sleep more. When you wake, your eyes sting. You try to speak once, but your voice comes out cracked and hoarse. You cough into your sleeve and find red there. You don't look again. That night, as the fire flickers low, you look up through a gap in the roof and see stars. Clear, sharp, and cold. It's the only beauty left in this place. You remember your mother telling you that the stars were windows into heaven. You wonder what she'd say now, seeing you here, your skin blue at the fingertips, your heart slow, your stomach empty. You close your eyes. It's not sleep. It's something quieter. The new year arrives without ceremony. There are no bells, no songs, no gathering of men to speak of beginnings. You don't even realise it's January until someone murmurs the date aloud, staring at the soot-smudged remnants of a torn almanac nailed to the barracks wall. It says 1608, but it might as well be any year, any century. Time has become a distant thing, something for the well-fed and dry. In the silence that follows, no one cheers, no one hopes. A new year is only a reminder that another month of cold remains. There are just over 30 of you now, perhaps fewer. No one is sure. The roll is unreadable, stained with grease and rain, its corners torn by wind. The man who once kept it has stopped asking for names. You recognise every face that remains, not because you know them, but because you've seen them day after day, thinning like silhouettes fading into snow. The fort is nearly still. Some days pass with no speech at all. Smith still walks the perimeter. You see him from time to time, wrapped in a long wool coat too large for him now. He walks slowly, as if wounded, pausing often to press a hand to the wooden stakes that mark the edge of Jamestown, as if checking they still exist. He speaks only when necessary, his voice lower now, more inward. You can hear in him something no longer trying to command, only to endure. There are rumours that the Powhatan watch you from the trees, that they know, that they've seen what you've become, but they do not approach. No trade, no warnings, no arrows, only the knowledge that you're being observed by people who do not interfere, who wait, perhaps, for time to finish the job you started yourselves. Inside the fort, the walls grow thinner, literally. Planks pulled from interiors are used for fuel. Even roof thatch is torn and burned, despite the wet smoke it gives. A smell of damp soot clings to every corner now. You reek of it. You feel it in your clothes, in your hair, in your skin. It fills your lungs each night and scratches your throat raw each morning. You no longer cough the way you used to. It's softer now, a hushed sound. Weak. One morning, the snow falls heavier than before. Thick, slow flakes that fall for hours without sound. You watch from beneath the collapsed awning of your shelter, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, and wonder how something so quiet can bury everything. The wind does not come that day. There's a strange peace to it. But it's a false one. You know that. A blanket over a grave. That same night, a man tries to burn part of the palisade. He waits until most are asleep and tears away at one of the inner corners near the gate, feeding the dry wood to his fire. When it's discovered, no one confronts him. What would be the point? You can't punish someone for trying not to die. Even Smith says nothing. He simply looks at the gap in the wall, nods once, and walks away. The fire from that wood burns hot that night. You sit near it. You feel it. You do not judge. You've stopped dreaming. You still sleep, but when you wake there are no images, no thoughts, only the firelight and the ache in your belly. Once you dreamt of home, of meals, of green hedgerows and the sound of iron hooves on cobbled streets. Now there is only the flickering of flame across walls. You try not to think about the ships, if they are coming, if they even know, if they care. There are whispers, half-truths and imaginings, that a relief mission was planned, that help is on its way. But it's been weeks, months. The river remains empty, and still, you look. You always look. Food no longer exists, not even in thought. You no longer hunger in the way you did in November. It has moved beyond sensation now. Your body feeds on itself. You feel it in your legs when you stand, your chest when you try to lift anything heavier than a stick. One man's skin has turned yellow, his eyes filmed over. Another has sores along his mouth and nose, open and unhealing. No one helps. No one speaks. There is a boy among the survivors, no older than 15. He doesn't speak, but he hums to himself sometimes, tuneless, without rhythm. You find it unsettling, but you don't tell him to stop. One night, you find him chewing on something behind the barracks. You do not ask what it is. You do not want to know. The rain returns for 2 days straight, and your shelter floods. The floor turns to muck. Your boots dissolve in it. You sleep sitting upright, arms crossed on your knees, chin down. Your neck cramps. Your back aches. But you're still breathing. That has become the measure of everything. And then one morning, a shape on the river. It is distant at first, barely more than a blur in the fog. You think your eyes are tricking you, so you turn away. But then a cry rises from one of the watch points, hoarse, unbelieving. You rise too fast and your head swims, but you see it. A ship. You do not cheer, you do not shout, you simply watch it come. It is weeks later that you will learn how close you were to being the last. That of the original 104 settlers, nearly 2/3 have died. That what you lived through will be known for generations as the most brutal chapter of English colonization. That stories will be told of the winter you survived. Stories of salt, of rot, of cannibalism and fire and silence. But in that moment, watching the ship drift closer, you feel only one thing. Relief. Not joy. Not salvation. Just a slow, weightless release in your chest. And the quiet hope that perhaps, just perhaps, you might see another spring. The ship edges closer on the river's icy breath, its sails tattered but proud against the dull sky. You stand with the others along the palisade, watching the small silhouette grow larger, a ghost made flesh returning to a land that barely feels like yours anymore. The cold bites at your cheeks, but you barely notice. Your limbs tremble, not from frost, but from something like disbelief. You hear the cry of gulls overhead, and the distant slap of waves against the hull. The air smells faintly of salt and tar, scents that feel both foreign and miraculous. For months you have been swallowed by the musk of rot, smoke and sweat. Now the sea breathes life into the fort like a whispered promise. The ship bears the colours of the Virginia Company, its flag fluttering weakly. On its deck men move with purpose, fresh faces, unscarred by hunger, still filled with warmth. Their presence is a jarring contrast to your own gaunt forms, eyes sunken and bodies hollow. You wonder if they see what you have become, if they feel the weight of the winter etched into your bones. The captain calls out orders, and a longboat is lowered into the water. You watch it drift silently toward the shore, carrying men who will soon become your lifeline, or your judges. As they reach the fort, you step back, unsure whether to greet them or hide from their gaze. Some of the men who greet the newcomers wear expressions you have not seen in weeks, hope. Others carry the look of men who have seen too much, who know better than to trust the arrival of salvation. You notice the officers carry fresh supplies, barrels of salted meat, bags of grain, crates of tools and clothing. You see the sharp glint of axes and the sturdy wood of new doors and beams. The thought of warmth, nourishment and shelter is almost too much to hold. But relief brings its own burdens. The newcomers look upon you not just as survivors, but as evidence of failure. You feel their eyes scanning the fort, judging the collapsed shelters, the meagre gardens, the skeletal forms that shuffle inside. There is silence, thick and uneasy. The captain offers promises, new leadership, renewed supplies, and the arrival of more settlers soon. Words that feel distant, like something read from a distant shore. You want to believe them, want to hold on to the thread of hope, but your heart is tired. The men help to rebuild. They patch the walls, clear the debris, and light fires that burn higher and brighter than before. The scent of fresh wood smoke mingles with the damp earth, filling the fort with a sense of tentative life. For the first time in months you feel the stirrings of something like comfort, yet the winter's shadow lingers in every corner. The dead still lie beneath shallow graves, and the memories of hunger and loss remain etched into the faces around you. The bond forged in suffering is fragile, held together by the quiet determination to survive. As night falls, you watch the ship anchored in the river's calm embrace, its lanterns flickering like distant stars. You wonder how many more winters you can endure here, in this place carved from hardship and hope. For now, you simply breathe. The cold is still outside, but inside there is fire, and with fire, a chance. In the weeks that follow the arrival of relief, the fort begins to stir with a cautious energy. The newcomers work tirelessly, their hands rough but steady as they rebuild what winter nearly claimed. You watch as walls are shored up with fresh timber, roofs patched with woven reeds, and the muddy paths levelled and widened. The scent of fresh-cut wood and damp earth fills the air, mingling with the lingering smoke from your own feeble fires. Each dawn feels a little warmer, not just because of the faint return of sunlight, but because of a quiet hope taking root in the hearts of the survivors. The frost still lingers, and the river remains slow and cold, but the sound of hammers and saws echoes through the morning mist like a promise. Food arrives in small but steady increments. Barrels of salted pork and beans are opened, their contents shared carefully among the men. You taste the salt and meat with a hunger you thought had been lost to memory, the flavours almost alien on your tongue. The strength returns slowly, but you feel it creeping back into your limbs with each passing day. The newcomers bring news from England. Ships have been delayed, storms raging across the Atlantic, but more are on their way. The promise of reinforcements and supplies brightens the conversations at the fire, replacing the silence that had settled like a shroud. Yet, despite the physical rebuilding, something intangible remains fragile. The memories of starvation and death haunt the night hours, the faces of those who did not survive lingering in the shadows. You catch yourself flinching at sudden sounds, and sometimes the quiet seems too loud. John Smith, once the iron-willed leader, is quieter now, his face marked with exhaustion and regret. He walks among the men, offering what counsel he can, but the weight of the past winter presses on him visibly. His sharp commands have softened into careful suggestions, his eyes searching the faces around him for signs of strength. The Powhatan too remain watchful. The uneasy truce holds, though you sense their patience is thin. Their canoes are glimpsed along the riverbanks, and the occasional trade resumes. But trust is still a fragile thing. You learn new words, gestures, ways to communicate without breaking the fragile peace. As the days grow longer, the sun warms the earth enough for small shoots to appear in the gardens. You help plant seeds, your fingers numb but hopeful as you press them into the soil. It is a slow process. Growth will be slow, and the risk of frost remains, but it feels like reclaiming a piece of life. At night, fires burn brighter and the men gather more often, sharing stories and memories. You hear laughter, hesitant but genuine, and the quiet hum of song returns. The walls of Jamestown, though battered, hold more than just shelter. They hold the fragile pulse of survival. Though the scars of the first winter will never fully fade, you find yourself looking forward to spring, to warmth, to the possibility of new beginnings. The fort, once a place of despair, now breathes with tentative life, and so do you. Spring does not burst forth in a rush at Jamestown. Instead, it arrives as a whisper, a gradual loosening of frost from the earth, a softening of the air, a tentative green beneath the dull browns of winter's remains. The days lengthen imperceptibly, and with each sunrise the cold recedes like a retreating tide. You walk through the settlement, noticing small changes. Patches of earth that were once hard and frozen now yield beneath your boots. Tiny shoots push through the soil, fragile and pale, reaching toward the weak sun. The fort seems less like a prison and more like a place reborn, but it is a slow, careful rebirth, one measured in cautious steps and quiet breaths. The survivors grow stronger, their bodies mending with the return of food and warmth. Muscles regain some of their lost tone, and eyes clear from the haze of sickness. Yet the memories of starvation linger, Thin hands still tremble, and hollow faces carry the shadow of what was endured. You pass by the remains of the first crop fields. The broken earth is tilled again, turned over by calloused hands with an urgency born of necessity. Seeds are sown carefully, with prayers whispered under breath. You join in, feeling the dirt crumble beneath your fingers, cool and moist. Planting becomes a ritual, a small act of defiance against the hunger that almost consumed you. Conversations return to the fort. Men speak in softer tones, sharing stories of home, of family left behind, of dreams yet unfulfilled. Laughter is still rare, but when it comes, it echoes with a fragile joy, as if unsure whether it is allowed. The Powhatan begin to reappear more frequently along the edges of the fort. Some trade food, others observe quietly from a distance. The tense silence of winter gives way to an uneasy dialogue. Glances exchanged, small gifts offered. You learn to recognize their patterns, their rhythms, the language of survival spoken without words. John Smith walks among you less often now. Rumours say he was injured in a skirmish, his leadership waning. His absence is felt, a void in the fragile structure of hope. You wonder who will rise to fill the space he leaves behind. Inside the fort you notice the slow return of the order. Shelter is improved, fires burn higher, and the stench of rot fades beneath the scent of fresh wood and earth. Yet beneath this surface, you feel the undercurrent of fear, a knowledge that survival is never guaranteed, that the past winter could return in memory or in fact. You rest at the edge of the river, watching the water move slowly downstream. It carries away the ice, the cold, the silence. You imagine it taking with it the ghosts of those who did not survive, the hunger and despair, and making space for something new. Spring at Jamestown is quiet. It is fragile. It is slow, but it is life. Though the land softens with spring's gentle return, the weight of what was endured in the cold months does not easily lift from the spirits of the survivors. You feel it in the silence between conversations, in the eyes that flicker away when memories edge too close. The frost may be melting from the soil, but a chill remains, quiet and persistent, in the heart of the fort. You walk the familiar paths with a careful tread, your boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. Around you, the fort is transforming. The palisades stand sturdier, repaired with fresh timber that smells of pine and promise. Smoke curls steadily from chimneys, no longer the desperate flames of winter, but a steady, comforting warmth. The smell of cooking fires mingles with the scent of growing crops and wet wood, creating a fragile symphony of renewal. Yet, beneath the surface, sickness lingers. Some men cough deeply, their chests rattling with a cold that refuses to leave. You see gaunt faces peering from behind cracked doors, bodies still weakened by months of starvation. Death did not cease with the thaw. It merely retreated, waiting for its moment. You know that disease has a way of lingering, silent and deadly. The small gardens show signs of life, but the harvest is still months away. Patience is a strange companion now, necessary, yet painful. Each seed planted carries the weight of a hope and desperation. You wonder if the earth will forgive this place, scarred as it is by neglect and suffering. The Powhatan remain watchful neighbours. Their canoes glide silently on the river's edge, their presence both reassuring and uneasy. Sometimes you trade with them, a handful of corn for a knife, a pouch of dried meat for a glimpse of knowledge about the land. These exchanges are tentative dances, delicate and wary. You find yourself thinking often of those lost to the winter, the friends whose names have slipped from memory, the bodies hastily buried beneath shallow graves that have already begun to erode. The silence they left behind is a constant companion, an echo in the empty spaces between the walls. John Smith's absence is felt deeply. His injury has kept him from leading, and others step forward, but none command with the same authority or conviction. The fort feels unmoored, still healing, still vulnerable. Nights are still cold, despite the days growing warmer. You huddle near the fire, wrapped in threadbare blankets, listening to the crackling flames and the distant sounds of the river. The sky is wide and dark, studded with stars that seem impossibly distant from this place of struggle. You think about the future, the uncertain seasons ahead, the hope of new settlers, the fragile peace with the Powhatan. You wonder how long this place can hold, how long you can endure. For now you remain, grounded in the slow rhythm of survival. caught between the fading shadow of winter and the hesitant dawn of spring. The river flows steadily now, its dark waters carrying the remnants of ice away like forgotten memories. You stand at the edge of the fort's wooden palisades, your breath rising in faint clouds that dissolve quickly in the softening air. The land around you is slowly awakening from its long frozen sleep. Buds peek from the barren branches, tentative greens breaking through the winter's dull brown. The earth beneath your feet is wet and heavy, the mud sucking at your boots with each careful step. Jamestown, once a fledgling dream carved from the wilderness, now feels like something older, scarred but enduring, like the land itself. The fort's walls bear the marks of desperate nights, blackened wood from fires, the scars of hastily repaired breaches, and the fresh cuts of new timber laid in hopeful repair. You trace your fingers over the rough grain of the palisade, feeling the pulse of survival hammered into every plank, every nail. Inside the fort, life stirs slowly but surely. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth, burning wood, and the faint, sweet tang of sprouting seeds. Gardens planted with trembling hands begin to show signs of growth, small shoots of corn and beans breaking the surface, as if daring the winter's ghost to return. You kneel among the rows, feeling the cool soil slip between your fingers, grounding you in this fragile moment. The men around you are gaunt but stronger. Their faces, once hollow with hunger, now carry the rough colour of renewed blood. Yet, beneath the surface, the toll of the winter remains etched deep. You see it in the careful way they move, every step measured, every breath cautious. Their eyes carry a quiet vigilance, as if waiting for the next disaster to strike. Sickness still clings stubbornly to the fort. A persistent cough haunts many men, the remnants of fevers that refuse to yield. You hear whispers of the flux, a malady no one fully understands but everyone fears. The healers do what they can, using herbs and poultices, but the line between life and death feels thinner than ever. The Powhatan watch from their villages along the riverbanks, their dark eyes observing, ever vigilant. Some trade continues, but it is hesitant, like a dance on fragile ice. You meet a few of their warriors across the cleared fields, sharing silent nods and guarded words. There is an unspoken understanding, both sides survivors of a harsh winter, both wary of what the other might bring. John Smith remains away from the fort for much of this season, his wounds slow to heal, his spirit burdened. His absence leaves a vacuum in leadership. Others rise to fill the space, but none with his former iron will. Decisions are made with a cautious hand, debates held in hushed tones. The men are learning that survival here is not just about strength but about patience, diplomacy, and hope. Night falls early, and with it, a cold that still bites beneath the blankets. You sit by the fire with a handful of others, sharing quiet stories of home, faint echoes of the lives left behind across the ocean. The flames flicker, casting long shadows on weathered faces. Laughter is rare but precious when it comes, a soft crackle in the silence. You think of the dead often, the friends lost to hunger, disease, and despair. Their absence is a hollow ache that never fully fades. You wonder if the earth beneath the fort's palisades remembers them, if the river carries their names as it carries the ice away. Each day is a battle between hope and fear. You plant, you build, you talk cautiously of what might come next. The ships promised by England have yet to arrive, and each distant sail on the horizon stirs your heart with a mixture of anticipation and dread. What will they find when they come? What stories will you tell? The land itself feels alive and watchful. The soft rustle of new leaves, the chirp of birds returning, the gentle flow of water, all whisper that life goes on. But you know the past winter waits behind the trees, a reminder of how quickly fortune can turn. And so, you move forward, slowly, carefully, with the fragile hope of a seed pushing through frozen ground, yearning toward light. The sun climbs higher each day now, its warmth coaxing the land from the grip of a long, cruel winter. You rise early, drawn by the soft golden light spilling over the palisade, and step outside into the damp, fresh air. The scent of wet earth and budding leaves fills your lungs, mingling with the faint smoke of morning fires. The world feels quiet yet alive, like a breath held just before release. Around you, the colony stirs. The fort's rough-hewn houses, patched and shored up after the long winter, seem sturdier now, standing resolute against the shifting winds. You hear the rhythmic thud of axes, the scrape of shovels turning soil, the murmur of voices carrying hope and determination. Children, small and fragile, dart through the mud, their laughter a fragile thread weaving through the heavy fabric of survival. The gardens, once mere promises beneath thin layers of soil, now burst with tender green shoots. Cornstalks stretch cautiously toward the sky, their leaves trembling in the gentle breeze. Beans climb trellises fashioned from saplings, intertwining with squash that spreads like a carpet over the earth. Each plant is a small triumph, a silent rebellion against the starvation and sickness that nearly destroyed this place. You work alongside others, your hands raw but steady as you tend the crops and repair the fences that protect them. The soil, once hard and frozen, now yields beneath your fingers, damp and rich with new life. You feel connected to the land in a way you never expected, as if it holds the fragile thread of your survival. But beneath this stirring life, the memory of the winter's horrors lingers like a shadow. The ache of loss remains raw. Empty beds, silent voices, the haunting absence of those who did not make it through the cold. You catch yourself flinching at sudden noises, or pausing when a familiar face seems too far gone to be real. Grief is a quiet companion, woven into the daily rhythm of work and survival. The Powhatan continue to watch and wait, their presence a steady reminder of the fragile peace holding the colony together. Some trade goods arrive, a pouch of dried corn, a handful of tobacco, a finely crafted arrowhead, exchanged with careful gestures and guarded smiles. You learn bits of their language, a dance of words and meanings that bridge worlds apart. Each exchange is a tentative step toward understanding, though mistrust still simmers beneath the surface. Inside the fort, new tensions rise. The absence of John Smith's firm leadership leaves questions unanswered and decisions deferred. The Council of Settlers debates strategies. Should they push deeper into the wilderness, seek new alliances, or simply survive the season? Voices rise and fall like the tide, but no clear path emerges. You listen quietly, aware that each choice carries weighty consequences. The river, once a cold, silent witness to suffering, now hums softly with life. Canoes glide along its surface, carrying men and goods, messages and rumours. You watch as fishermen cast their nets, hoping for a catch to supplement the meagre stores. The water reflects the pale blue of the sky, a mirror to the uncertain future. Night falls with a gentle hush. You sit by the fire with others, the flames flickering softly, casting warm light on faces lined with fatigue and resolve. Stories are shared, some old, from England's green hills, others new, born of this strange land. The voices blend with the crackling fire and the distant call of night birds, weaving a fragile tapestry of memory and hope. You feel the weight of the past months settle around you, a silent pressure that never fully lifts. Yet beneath it all a quiet flame burns, the stubborn, unyielding will to endure. The first winter nearly claimed you, but you remain. The land breathes anew, and with it, so do you. Each day is a careful step forward, a dance with uncertainty and courage. The season turns, the colony grows, and the story of Jamestown continues, woven from hardship, hope, and the fragile promise of life. The days stretch long beneath the steady gaze of the summer sun, the heat settling over the land like a thick, slow-moving wave. You wake early, before the light spills fully over the palisade to the chirp of crickets and the low murmur of the river. The air is heavy now, scented with the sharp tang of wild herbs and the rich, loamy earth that has finally begun to warm. Sweat beads at your brow as you step outside, feeling the weight of the sun's rays settling on your shoulders. The fort is alive in a way it has not been since the earliest days. The scent of cooking fires mingles with the perfume of blooming wildflowers and freshly turned soil. Gardens that were tentative and fragile in spring now flourish with cornstalks taller than your waist, beans twisting and climbing high above the fences, and squash leaves spreading wide like green sails. The promise of harvest hangs heavy, a balm to weary hearts. You move through the settlement with a sense of cautious purpose, the tasks at hand endless but essential. Repairing fences, tending the crops, hauling fresh water from the river, all become parts of a rhythm that keeps despair at bay. The men work beside you, their bodies lean but stronger, their eyes carrying a flicker of something almost like pride. Yet, The summer brings new burdens alongside the growth. The heat clings thickly to the air, and with it comes a new wave of sickness. Fevers flare in the night, and the telltale signs of dysentery spread quietly through the camp. The healers work tirelessly, boiling herbs and concocting poultices, but death still stalks the shadows, swift and unrelenting. You catch sight of faces pale and strained, and hear the soft sobs of those who have lost friends anew. The cycle of suffering seems unbroken, one season's hope quickly threatened by the next cruelty. The fort hums with the tension between life and death, growth and decay. The relationship with the Powhatan shifts subtly in this season. The men and women who approach the fort are both wary and watchful, their presence a constant reminder of the delicate balance between cooperation and conflict. Trade continues in cautious exchanges, corn for tools, furs for cloth, and with it, a growing understanding. You learn to read their gestures and expressions, slowly piecing together the unspoken language of peace. But beneath the surface, tensions simmer. Rumours of rival tribes, of broken alliances drift on the summer breeze. The settlers talk in hushed tones about the precariousness of their position, the thin line they tread between survival and disaster. The absence of strong leadership is felt keenly as the days wear on. Without John Smith's firm hand, decisions falter, and uncertainty gnaws at the edges of the colony's fragile cohesion. You hear whispered debates late into the night, voices rising and falling with no clear resolution. As evening falls, the heat softens, and the sky fades from gold to a deep indigo. You sit by the fire with others, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the rough walls of the fort. The river reflects the stars, steady and slow, a quiet witness to the fragile pulse of life within these wooden walls. The long summer days stretch before you, filled with toil and hope, pain and perseverance. The colony breathes, struggles and endures, still fragile, still uncertain, but alive. The sun blazes relentlessly overhead now, turning the air heavy and still. You move slowly through the settlement, feeling the weight of the heat pressing down on your shoulders, your skin slick with sweat despite the early hour. The ground beneath your feet is cracked in places, dry and unforgiving, a sharp contrast to the soggy mud of spring. The river shimmers in the distance, its surface like glass, reflecting a sky of endless blue. The fort is busy, yet the activity is tinged with unease. You see men hauling water buckets in ceaseless rotation, their faces grim as they fight the thirst and fatigue that come with the season. Others tend the crops with tired hands, bending beneath the sun to pull weeds or shore up weakened fences. The promise of a harvest still hangs in the air, but it is mixed now with a quiet worry. Will the fields survive the drought? Will the food be enough to carry them into the next season? Illness is no stranger this summer. The heat breeds mosquitoes, their buzzing a constant irritation, and with them come fevers and chills that weaken even the strongest. The sick are tended to in cramped quarters, where the air is thick with the smell of herbs and sweat. You hear whispers of men taken in the night, bodies growing cold beneath the thin blankets of the sick room. Every cough, every shiver, carries the weight of uncertainty. The fragile peace with the Powhatan hangs by a thread. Their villages loom near the edge of the fort's clearing, their people watching and waiting. Trade continues, but it is marked by a quiet tension. You notice wary glances exchanged between settlers and native warriors, moments where smiles falter and hands twitch near weapons. Stories circulate of raids and skirmishes elsewhere along the river, and fear seeps into the conversations of the fort's inhabitants. Inside the council meetings, voices rise more often, the debates sharp and fractious. Some argue for expansion, for pushing deeper into the wilderness to secure more resources and safety. Others warn of provoking the natives, urging caution and diplomacy. You listen to the heated exchanges, feeling the fragility of unity strain under the weight of survival. John Smith's shadow lingers in the background, his absence leaving a void in leadership and confidence. Without his firm hand, decisions falter and indecision spreads. You watch as men struggle to fill roles they were never prepared for, their uncertainty reflected in the weary lines of their faces. Despite the hardships, moments of quiet beauty persist. At dawn, the river catches the first light, glowing like molten silver. Birds sing in the trees, their melodies weaving through the hum of the settlement. At night, the stars stretch wide across the sky, indifferent to the struggles below. You find yourself walking the edge of the fort more often, gazing out toward the forest where shadows deepen and mysteries linger. The land holds stories, of ancient times, of peoples long gone, and of the uncertain future you now share. Each day is a balance between hope and fear, life and death, peace and conflict. The summer presses on, unyielding, a test of endurance for all who call Jamestown home. The days lengthen further, and with the passing of June the heat grows more oppressive, settling over the land like a heavy blanket that refuses to lift. You rise with the dawn, before the sun burns too fiercely, to join the others in the slow, methodical labour of tending the fields. The soil is dry and cracked, but the stubborn plants, corn, beans and squash, reach skyward, clinging desperately to life. Each green shoot is a fragile thread of hope woven into the harsh fabric of this new world. The fort buzzes with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Men and women move through their routines with a measured urgency, aware that the harvest will decide who survives the coming months. The air carries the mingled sense of sweat, fresh earth, and smoke from cooking fires where roots and whatever game they've caught simmer quietly. Hunger remains a constant companion, but there is a tentative optimism beneath the weariness, yet the shadow of illness still looms. The summer heat has bred a host of maladies, fevers that leave men trembling and weak, dysentery that strips bodies of strength and hope alike. You see the lines of worry etched deeply into the faces of the healers, their hands trembling as they prepare bitter herbal remedies. Each new illness is a threat, a reminder that survival here is a precarious gift. Beyond the walls, the Powhatan continue their watchful presence. Their villages hum quietly with life, smoke rising from their fires in spirals that dance lazily against the sky. Trade persists, though it is measured and cautious. You witness exchanges of corn and furs, knives and cloth, small acts of commerce that thread tentative connections between two very different worlds. But beneath these gestures the fragile peace holds uneasily, like a thread stretched taut over a chasm. Inside the council chamber, tensions flare with increasing frequency. Some settlers argue for more aggressive expansion, driven by desperation and the fear of scarcity. Others plead for patience, urging the importance of diplomacy and careful planning. The absence of John Smith's resolute leadership is a palpable void, and the settlers wrestle with decisions that could mean survival or destruction. The river continues its steady course, indifferent to human struggles. You sometimes find solace at its edge, watching the current carry away leaves and twigs as if washing away the weight of the past. The murmurs of the forest, birds, insects, and the whisper of the wind through the trees offer a quiet counterpoint to the turmoil within the fort. Evenings bring a fragile respite. Gathered around fires, stories rise and fall like the flames, some recalling lands far away, others spun from the day's small victories and losses. The stars above shimmer cold and distant, a reminder of a vast world beyond the struggles of this isolated place. With every passing day the weight of the harvest grows heavier, and the tenuous threads of alliance and survival are stretched ever thinner. You understand, deeply, that Jamestown remains a fragile dream, balanced precariously between hope and despair. The late summer sun burns hot and relentless, casting long shadows over the fort as the days begin their slow retreat toward autumn. You wake early, the cool morning air carrying the scent of damp earth and ripening crops. The gardens are fuller now, corn tassels whisper in the breeze, and beans hang heavy on their vines, but the soil beneath them is parched, cracked by the heat that has stretched on for weeks. The fort itself feels tense, the energy among the settlers taut like a drawn bowstring. The long months of toil and hardship have worn on every man and woman, their bodies lean but their spirits fraying at the edges. The sickness that ebbed with spring has surged again, carried by the insects bred in the summer heat, striking with a cruel efficiency that leaves no one untouched. You see the toll it takes. Friends and neighbours weakened, some carried silently to the small burial grounds beyond the palisade, where freshly turned earth marks their passage. The air is thick with quiet mourning, each loss a weight added to the already heavy burden of survival. The uneasy peace with the Powhatan continues, but the veneer is thin. You hear whispers of unrest, of skirmishes farther downriver, rumours carried on the wind like a chill warning. The men grow more restless, their eyes flicking toward the forest edges with suspicion and fear. Some argue for preemptive strikes, while others plead for caution. knowing that the fragile alliance is all that keeps the colony alive. Within the council, voices grow sharp and impatient. Decisions are made hurriedly, often without consensus, reflecting the fractures forming beneath the surface. Without Smith's firm guidance, leadership feels fragmented, the settlers caught between desperation and uncertainty. You find yourself standing at the edge of the riverbank at dusk, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with bruised purples and fiery reds. The water flows steadily, carrying with it the memories of those who came before and the uncertain future ahead. The whispers of the forest and the distant cries of wildlife mingle with the restless murmurs from the fort, a symphony of unease. As night falls, the heat gives way to a creeping chill, a reminder that the long winter lies ahead, waiting silently beyond the horizon. The days of summer may be waning, but the struggles of Jamestown are far from over. Each breath, each step carries the weight of a fragile hope, balanced precariously on the edge of survival. The sun climbs lower each day, casting longer, cooler shadows across the fort's battered walls. You awake to a brittle chill that seeps into your bones, a whispered warning of the coming cold. The air smells of drying leaves and wood smoke, mingled with the faint, bittersweet scent of ripening fruit left hanging on gnarled branches. The earth, once cracked and dry beneath your feet, is now littered with the scattered debris of late summer's fading bounty. Within the fort, a restless energy pulses beneath the weary calm. Men and women hurry about, their hands calloused and faces lined with exhaustion, driven by the urgency of harvest and preparation. You move through the gardens, now heavy with corn ears wrapped in pale husks, beans swollen and ready to be picked, and squash spreading in wide green leaves over the soil like a protective cloak. But beneath the surface, tension coils tighter with each passing day. The memory of the brutal winter hangs over you like a ghost, a constant reminder of how quickly fortune can turn. The sickness that struck so mercilessly in the heat lingers stubbornly among the settlers, and the toll weighs heavily on the community. Graves are dug in quiet corners of the fort, marked simply with rough wooden crosses, and the hollow spaces left behind by lost friends feel like wounds that refuse to heal. The uneasy peace with the Powhatan continues, but the undercurrent of distrust grows thicker. You catch glimpses of warriors watching from the tree line, their faces inscrutable beneath painted patterns and feathered headdresses. The trade that once brought cautious smiles now carries sharper edges, bartered goods exchanged alongside wary glances and unspoken warnings. You know that beneath the surface lies a fragile truce, held together by necessity and the silent hope that neither side will be forced to break it. Within the fort's council, voices rise more often in argument, the strain of survival fraying nerves and testing alliances. Without a steady hand to guide them, the settlers grapple with decisions that will shape the future of the colony, choices between diplomacy and force, between hope and fear. At dusk you find yourself drawn to the riverbank, where the water glistens cold and dark beneath a sky heavy with gathering clouds. The forest whispers around you, ancient and vast, a reminder of how small and vulnerable the settlement truly is in this vast untamed land. The wind carries the scent of smoke and damp earth, mingling with the distant calls of wild birds settling in for the night. As night falls, a chill wraps around the fort like a warning. The long shadows of autumn gather close, reminding you that the seasons will turn once more, and with them, the hard, unyielding trial of winter approaches again. The days grow shorter and cooler now, the relentless heat of summer retreating beneath an overcast sky. You awake to a soft grey light filtering through the rough planks of the shelter, the air tinged with the dampness of the early morning mist. The ground is damp beneath your feet, and the scent of decaying leaves and cold earth fills your lungs, a reminder that the cycle of seasons turns inexorably onward. Within the fort, a quiet urgency takes hold. The harvest is in full swing, and every hand is needed. You find yourself moving among rows of corn stalks, their golden tassels bowed heavy with ripe ears, while beans and squash are gathered carefully and stored to stave off the coming scarcity. Each bundle of food feels like a fragile promise, a lifeline stretched across the uncertain months ahead. Yet beneath this flurry of activity, the weight of loss presses down. The fort is quieter than it once was. Empty spaces mark the absence of those who succumbed to sickness and hardship. The scent of smoke from funerary fires mingles with the ever-present aroma of wood smoke from cooking fires, casting a sombre veil over daily life. The Powhatan, ever watchful, maintain their distance but remain close. Their villages, dark silhouettes against the trees, are reminders of a world both hostile and necessary to understand. Trade continues, corn for metal tools, furs for cloth, but each exchange is shadowed by a wary respect born of past violence and the fragile nature of peace. Inside the council, debates grow sharper and more urgent. The absence of strong leadership is felt keenly as settlers argue over the best path forward. Some call for greater diplomacy, others for increased defences and preparations against possible attacks. The colony teeters on the edge of discord, fragile alliances tested by fear and uncertainty. As you walk the perimeter of the fort in the fading light, the forest seems to close in, dark and impenetrable. The sounds of night animals rise, owl calls, the rustle of unseen creatures, and the wind carries a chill that hints at the winter to come. The river, usually a source of life and passage, now feels like a barrier between safety and the unknown wilderness beyond. The coming months hold the promise of renewal, but also the threat of hardship renewed. You understand, with a growing sense of unease, that the survival of Jamestown depends not only on the land and the fort's walls, but on fragile human bonds, on trust that is as scarce and precious as the crops you tend. The light grows thinner each morning, a pale, fragile thing barely pushing through heavy clouds that hang low over the fort. You wake wrapped in a thin blanket, the chill already biting at your skin despite the effort to stay warm. The air smells damp and cold, a stark contrast to the heavy heat of summer now past. Underfoot, the earth is soft and muddy, softened by recent rains that seeped through the canopy of trees and into the soil. Life in the settlement has taken on a frantic pace, driven by the urgency of preparation. You move through the camp, hands raw from gathering and storing what little food the land can still offer. Corn is carefully shucked and stacked, beans strung in long lines to dry, and squash carefully wrapped and placed in cool, dark corners to preserve what might become your only sustenance for the coming months. But with the harvest comes a quiet reckoning. The toll of disease, starvation, and hardship has thinned the ranks of the settlers. Faces you once knew well are now ghostly memories, their places left empty at the tables and around the fires. The fort, once crowded with the noisy bustle of hope, now hums with a quieter, more sombre rhythm. Beyond the palisade, the forest seems darker, the trees looming like silent sentinels watching over a fragile human struggle. The Powhatan remain close, their presence a complex mix of neighbour and potential threat. You see warriors moving through the underbrush, their movements swift and silent, eyes sharp and calculating. The uneasy peace feels thinner than ever, a thread stretched to its breaking point. Inside the fort's walls, tensions flare in quiet conversations and wary glances. Food stores are limited, and whispers of rationing circulate. The settlers argue over strategy, whether to fortify the defences or seek further aid from across the ocean, whether to risk hostile contact with the natives or attempt more delicate diplomacy. The absence of strong, unified leadership leaves these questions hanging, unanswered and urgent. At dusk you find yourself drawn to the riverbank, the water cold and dark beneath a sky mottled with grey clouds. The current moves steadily, indifferent to the fragile lives clinging to its banks. The forest whispers secrets carried on the wind, the rustle of leaves mingling with the distant cries of night creatures settling into the darkness. The chill in the air grows sharper with each passing night, a quiet herald of the harsh winter looming just beyond the horizon. You feel the weight of time pressing down, the uncertain future pressing in like the shadows gathering around the fort. The mornings greet you now with a sharpness in the air that was absent just weeks before. You wake to a frost glistening on the rough wooden beams of the shelter, tiny diamonds melting slowly as the weak sunlight filters through the gaps. The earth beneath your feet is cold and hard, the vibrant greens of summer faded into muted browns and greys. Each breath you take is visible, a pale cloud that lingers before dissolving into the stillness. The fort moves with a measured urgency. Men and women work tirelessly to prepare for the winter that creeps ever closer, stacking firewood in neat piles against the palisade walls, patching holes in shelters, and gathering what food remains with cautious hands. You help where you can, feeling the strain in your muscles from days of unending labour, but knowing that every moment counts. The harvest, though better than feared, is still a scant bounty against the looming scarcity. Corn and beans are stored carefully, their weight a promise and a worry in equal measure. The threat of famine is never far from any conversation, a shadow lurking behind every shared meal. The sickness that haunted the summer months has eased but not disappeared. The survivors move among the living with pale faces and lingering coughs, a testament to battles fought quietly in cramped quarters. The healers, exhausted and thin, continue their efforts with dwindling supplies and fading hope. Outside the fort, the Powhatan watch with quiet eyes. Their presence is a constant reminder of the fragile line the settlers walk between friendship and hostility. You see warriors patrolling the outskirts, their movements careful and deliberate, an unspoken challenge hanging in the air. The exchanges of goods have slowed, the wary glances exchanged heavier with unspoken tension. Within the council, the strain of leadership grows heavier. Decisions must be made quickly and decisively, yet the fractures among the settlers widen. Fear and fatigue colour every discussion, and you sense that the colony's unity is unravelling just as winter approaches. At dusk you stand near the river's edge, the cold water reflecting the pale light of a weak moon rising behind clouds. The wind carries the scent of wood smoke and damp leaves, whispering warnings you dare not ignore. The forest beyond waits, vast and dark, a reminder of how small and vulnerable this settlement truly is. You know the hardest days lie ahead, the true test of endurance just beyond the horizon. The chill before the storm settles deep within your bones, and you brace yourself for the winter that will decide the fate of Jamestown. The first true frost bites into the morning air, coating the fort in a brittle silence. You awaken wrapped tightly in threadbare blankets, your breath misting in the cold as you step outside into a world transformed. The vibrant greens and golds of late autumn have faded into a muted palette of greys and browns, the trees stripped bare and the ground frozen hard beneath your boots. A stillness hangs over the land, both beautiful and ominous, as if nature itself is holding its breath. Inside the palisade walls, the mood is heavy with a mix of exhaustion and quiet dread. You move among your fellow settlers, faces drawn and pale, eyes shadowed with the weight of what has been lost and what is yet to come. The stores of food, carefully preserved and rationed, seem precariously small against the growing cold. Each handful of corn, each dried bean, carries the fragile promise of survival, yet the fear gnaws at everyone's resolve. The sickness that ravaged the colony in summer and fall has left scars, some visible in the hollow cheeks and trembling hands of survivors, others etched invisibly in the heavy silence that follows, whispered names of the lost. The healers work tirelessly, their supplies dwindling, their hope fraying at the edges. You watch as a friend, once strong and full of laughter, now lies still and pale, the cruel grip of disease finally claiming another soul. Beyond the walls, the Powhatan watch and wait. Their presence is a quiet force, neither openly hostile nor fully welcoming. You see warriors moving silently among the trees, their eyes sharp and unreadable. The fragile truce is a fragile thread stretched taut, and you wonder if it will hold through the long winter or snap under the strain. The council meets in hushed urgency, their voices low but intense. Debates over defence, food and alliances fill the cramped chamber, but beneath the words lies a deeper fear, of starvation, of attack, of the unforgiving wilderness closing in. Without the steady hand of John Smith, leadership feels fractured, decisions weighed down by fatigue and uncertainty. As night falls, you find yourself drawn to the riverbank, the water cold and dark beneath a sky heavy with stars that seem distant and indifferent. The wind carries a chill that bites deep, weaving through the settlement like a ghost of the winter to come. You feel the weight of all that has passed and all that is yet to come pressing down, a silent reckoning unfolding beneath the vast, unyielding sky. The edge of survival feels closer than ever, and with every breath you sense the fragile thread holding this fledgling colony together might soon unravel. The cold settles deeper now, a biting presence that lingers in every corner of the fort. You wake before dawn, the pale light barely illuminating the rough wooden walls that surround you. Your breath comes out in small clouds, fogging the chill air as you rise and pull your threadbare cloak tighter around your shoulders. Outside, the frost sparkles faintly on the ground, a delicate lacework of ice crystals that crunch softly underfoot. Every movement feels heavier in the cold, muscles stiff and fingers numb despite the worn gloves you clutch. The days grow short and grey, swallowed quickly by dusk that descends like a dark curtain. Within the fort, the hum of activity is quieter but no less urgent. Men and women gather firewood in bundles, stacking it carefully near shelters and around the walls. The warmth of the flames will be a fragile defence against the creeping cold, but firewood is scarce and precious. You join in the work, your hands aching as you haul wood from the forest edge, mindful of the watchful eyes of the Powhatan who linger beyond the trees. The tension between the two groups has deepened with the falling temperatures. Trade has slowed to a trickle, suspicion thickening the air like the smoke from the fires burning low in the hearths. Food stores are carefully counted and rationed. You help measure out small portions of cornmeal and dried beans, each crumb carefully allocated. Hunger gnaws quietly, a constant companion, but the settlers dare not speak its name too loudly. The memory of the last winter's desperate scarcity weighs heavily on every mind, a grim reminder of how quickly hope can fade. Sickness has not entirely left the fort. Coughs echo in the cold, sharp and persistent, and the healers move from cot to cot, their faces drawn and pale. Their remedies are simple and often ineffective, but they offer the small comfort of care in a world where so much feels beyond control. As the days pass, the fort feels smaller and more confining. The walls both shelter and cage. Outside, the forest stands silent and watchful, its shadows lengthening with the encroaching cold. The river's surface darkens under grey skies, its steady flow a quiet reminder of time's relentless march. At night, you lie on your pallet, muscles sore and mind restless, listening to the wind's mournful whistle through the gaps in the walls. The long winter approaches, its promise heavy in the air. You know the coming months will test every ounce of strength and will, pushing the settlers to the very edge of endurance. The cold settles deeper now, a biting presence that lingers in every corner of the fort. You wake before dawn, the pale light barely illuminating the rough wooden walls that surround you. Your breath comes out in small clouds, fogging the chill air as you rise and pull your threadbare cloak tighter around your shoulders. Outside, the frost sparkles faintly on the ground, a delicate lacework of ice crystals that crunch softly underfoot. Every movement feels heavier in the cold, muscles stiff and fingers numb despite the worn gloves you clutch. The days grow short and grey, swallowed quickly by dusk that descends like a dark curtain. Within the fort, the hum of activity is quieter but no less urgent. Men and women gather firewood in bundles, stacking it carefully near shelters and around the walls. The warmth of the flames will be a fragile defence against the creeping cold, but firewood is scarce and precious. You join in the work, your hands aching as you haul wood from the forest's edge, mindful of the watchful eyes of the Powhatan who linger beyond the trees. The tension between the two groups has deepened with the falling temperatures. Trade has slowed to a trickle, suspicion thickening the air like the smoke from the fires burning low in the hearths. Food stores are carefully counted and rationed. You help measure out small portions of cornmeal and dried beans, each crumb carefully allocated. Hunger gnaws quietly, a constant companion, but the settlers dare not speak its name too loudly. The memory of the last winter's desperate scarcity weighs heavily on every mind, a grim reminder of how quickly hope can fade. Sickness has not entirely left the fort. Coughs echo in the cold, sharp and persistent, and the healers move from cot to cot, their faces drawn and pale. Their remedies are simple and often ineffective, but they offer the small comfort of care in a world where so much feels beyond control. As the days pass, the fort feels smaller and more confining. The walls both shelter and cage. Outside, the forest stands silent and watchful, its shadows lengthening with the encroaching cold. The river's surface darkens under grey skies, its steady flow a quiet reminder of time's relentless march. At night, you lie on your pallet, muscles sore and mind restless, listening to the wind's mournful whistle through the gaps in the walls. The long winter approaches, its promise heavy in the air. You know the coming months will test every ounce of strength and will, pushing the settlers to the very edge of endurance. The frost clings stubbornly to the ground now, the morning sun weak and pale as it struggles to rise above a sky smeared with dull, heavy clouds. You awaken to a biting cold that seeps through the cracks in the wooden walls, wrapping around you like a silent, unyielding shroud. Each breath feels sharp in your lungs, a reminder that the unforgiving season has begun to claim the land. The fort, once bustling with hopeful energy, now moves in slower, wearier rhythms. The settlers' faces are drawn tight with fatigue, their movements measured and cautious as if each step requires an effort of will. The stores of food, carefully hoarded and rationed, shrink day by day. You count your own shares of cornmeal and dried beans, the familiar grains now tasting like ash on your tongue. Outside the palisade, the forest stands motionless, trees skeletal against the grey sky. The Powhatan, ever watchful, keep their distance, their eyes wary and unreadable. Trade has all but ceased, and the fragile peace feels brittle as thin ice, threatening to crack beneath the strain of hunger and cold. Within the fort, sickness lingers like a shadow. The healers work tirelessly, their faces pale and drawn from exhaustion. Coughs echo in the cramped quarters, soft and persistent, while feverish bodies lie still beneath thin blankets. The fear of death is ever present, whispered in quiet corners and heavy silences. The council meets less frequently now, their voices hushed and heavy with worry. There are fewer hands to build and repair, fewer voices to share decisions, and a growing sense of isolation that settles over the community like a cold fog. At the river's edge, you stand watching the slow, dark current. The water moves steadily, indifferent to the struggles on its banks. The wind whispers through the bare branches of the trees, carrying with it a chill that feels like a warning. The long winter has truly arrived, wrapping the land in its cold, unyielding embrace. As night falls, the fort grows colder still. Fires burn low, their warmth fleeting against the rising cold. You huddle close to the embers, muscles aching and spirits fragile, knowing that the hardest days are still to come. The fort lies beneath a leaden sky, heavy with the promise of snow yet to fall. Each morning, you awake to the bitter cold that creeps like an unwelcome guest into every corner of your shelter. Your fingers, stiff and numb, struggle to perform the simplest tasks, kindling a fire, tying knots, gathering meagre rations. The earth outside is hard and unforgiving, a frozen landscape where even the animals have grown scarce. Within the walls, the once bustling sounds of the settlement have diminished to a hollow silence. The air is thick with a damp chill that seeps into bones and spirits alike. You move quietly among the settlers, their faces pale and gaunt, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and despair. Conversations have grown sparse, replaced by the heavy weight of unspoken fears and the gnawing hunger that lingers beneath every glance. The stores of food are nearly spent, each handful rationed with grim precision. The memory of the last cruel winter looms large in everyone's mind, a spectre that haunts every meal and every restless night. You feel the sharp pangs of hunger, a persistent ache that shadows your every movement. Sickness, relentless and unforgiving, continues its silent march. The healers, thin and weary, move among the sick with practiced care, offering what little comfort they can. You watch as another friend fades away, the light in their eyes dimming like the dying embers of a fire long past. Outside, the forest is an impenetrable wall of frost-covered trees, their bare branches creaking softly in the biting wind. The Powhatan have withdrawn into the shadows, their presence a distant echo rather than a constant watch. The fragile truce seems to hold, but it offers little comfort against the pressing dangers within. The fort itself feels smaller, its wooden walls worn and weathered by storms and time. Repairs go undone, hands too few and too tired to keep pace with the demands of survival. The nights are long and cold, filled with the restless shuffles of those who cannot find rest, their dreams haunted by memories and fears. You find yourself drawn to the river once more, its dark waters moving slowly beneath a sky thick with grey clouds. The cold wind carries whispers of things lost and things yet to come, a solemn reminder of the fragility of life on this distant shore. The long winter stretches ahead, vast and unyielding, and you understand more deeply than ever the cruel truth. Survival here is a fragile, fleeting thing, balanced precariously on the edge of hope and despair. The days have shrunk to mere hours of pale light, and the cold seems to settle into your very bones. You awake each morning to a landscape hushed under a blanket of frost, the ground frozen hard and unforgiving beneath your weary feet. Your breath curls in the frigid air, a faint mist that quickly dissipates into the grey stillness surrounding the fort. Inside the cramped quarters, the atmosphere is thick with quiet desperation. The chatter that once filled the air has faded to murmurs or silence. Eyes avoid one another, haunted by hunger and fatigue that weigh heavy on every soul. Rations grow smaller and more precious, every crumb carefully measured, every morsel contested in whispered thoughts. The sickness lingers, a relentless shadow that steals strength and life with cruel impartiality. You watch as friends weaken, their bodies frail and trembling, the fire in their eyes dimming as the days drag on. The healers, despite their best efforts, offer little more than solace in fading hope. Outside, the Powhatan remain distant, their presence a silent watch beneath the skeletal trees. The fragile peace holds, though it feels as tenuous as the thin scraps of food that keep you alive. The wilderness beyond the fort seems to close in, dark and silent, an ever-present threat alongside the harshness within. You move through the camp, shoulders hunched against the cold, heart heavy with the knowledge that the winter's grip is tightening. Each step is slower now, weighed down by exhaustion and a gnawing hunger that aches beneath your ribs. The walls of the fort offer little comfort against the vastness of the cold and the desperation it breeds. At night, you lie awake, muscles aching and mind restless, haunted by the faces of those who have slipped away and the uncertainty of those still here. The fire's warmth is fleeting, and the long hours stretch endlessly before you, filled with the silence of survival hanging by a fragile thread. The winter darkens early now, swallowing the day in shadows before noon. You wake beneath a sky heavy with thick, low clouds, the light weak and colourless. The chill in the air is sharp enough to sting exposed skin, and inside the wooden walls of the fort, warmth is a scarce and precious commodity. Your breath forms small clouds as you rise, the cold creeping into every corner of your bones despite the thin layers you wear. The fort is quiet but tense, the residents moving slowly and deliberately. Each task, fetching firewood, stirring a small pot of gruel, tending to the weak, is performed with measured care, a silent acknowledgement of the fragile balance between life and death. Food stores have dwindled to near nothing, and the rationing grows stricter by the day. Even the strongest now show signs of weakness, faces drawn and eyes dull. Sickness continues its merciless spread. You hear coughing echo through the darkened rooms, soft and desperate, while those too weak to rise lie huddled beneath scant blankets. The healers are worn thin, their efforts often futile against the relentless tide of disease and exhaustion. Outside the palisade, the forest stands like a silent wall of dark limbs and frozen earth. The river moves slowly beneath a crust of ice, its cold current a reminder of the life force that flows beyond the fort's fragile defences. The Powhatan remain distant, their presence a quiet shadow rather than a threat or comfort. The uneasy peace holds, but you sense its fragility with every breath. In the council chamber, voices are low and heavy with despair. Plans falter, and hope is a dwindling ember. The absence of strong leadership leaves decisions weighed down by fear and fatigue. You witness arguments tempered by exhaustion, the community's unity fraying as the hardships persist. At night, you lie awake in the cold, the sounds of the wind and creaking wood your only companions. The dark seems endless, pressing in on every side. You feel the weight of endless night, the slow erosion of hope, and the stark realization that survival here is a battle waged not just against the elements, but against the very limits of human endurance. The days bleed together beneath a sky heavy with frost and shadow. You wake to a world stripped bare, where the trees stand as stark silhouettes against a grey horizon, their branches brittle and lifeless. The cold presses relentlessly, biting through layers of cloth and wood, settling deep into your bones and your spirit. Each morning feels like a fragile reprieve, a brief pause before the inevitable erosion of strength resumes. Inside the fort, the mood is sombre and subdued. Voices are hushed, conversations brief, as if energy itself is too precious to waste on words. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and damp earth, mingled with something less tangible, a pervasive weariness that settles over every face. Hunger has hollowed many, and sickness has stolen the vitality of even the strongest among you. You move through the settlement like a ghost, your footsteps muffled against the frozen ground. The stores of food are nearly exhausted, and the rationing tighter still. Each meal is smaller than the last, a bitter reminder of the harsh reality you all face. The ache of emptiness gnaws at your insides, an unyielding companion through the long cold hours. Sickness continues to claim its victims quietly but mercilessly. The healers, now mere shadows themselves, tend the dying with hands that tremble not only from cold, but from exhaustion and grief. You see the faces of friends, once full of hope and laughter, now drawn and pale, their eyes reflecting the fading light of life. Outside, the forest watches silently, an indifferent witness to the slow unravelling of the colony's fragile hold on survival. The Powhatan remain distant, their presence a silent echo amid the biting wind and frozen earth. The uneasy truce has held, but it feels as fragile as the fragile lives within the palisade walls. Night falls early, cloaking the fort in a darkness as deep and unyielding as the despair settling over the settlement. You lie awake, muscles aching and heart heavy, feeling the slow hollowing of hope, the quiet surrender to the overwhelming weight of winter's cruelty. The world outside your shelter has transformed into a desolate expanse of frost and shadow, where every breath feels like a shard of ice piercing your lungs. The sun, a distant pale orb, offers little warmth, sinking quickly beneath a sky heavy with grey clouds that promise relentless cold. You awake to a silence so deep it feels as though the earth itself is holding its breath. Within the palisade, the settlement moves like a flickering flame struggling against the wind. Faces are gaunt, eyes hollow and glassy, bodies frail and trembling. The cold has seeped into every corner of life here, wrapping its relentless fingers around hope and strength alike. The stores of food have long since dwindled into memory, and the hunger is a constant ache that shadows every moment. Sickness ravages the colony with merciless persistence. The weak lie quiet, their breaths shallow and uneven, while those still able to move carry the weight of their own mortality. The healers, exhausted and despondent, do what little they can with meagre supplies and fading spirits. Death has become a constant presence, a silent companion at every door. Outside, the forest is a cold, indifferent witness. The Powhatan, once a distant presence, remain silent watchers beyond the frozen tree line. The fragile peace between the two peoples feels tenuous, overshadowed by the pressing fight for survival within the walls. The council has all but dissolved into despair. Leadership has become fragmented, decisions weighed down by fear and fatigue. The community, once bound by hope and purpose, now teeters on the brink of collapse, frayed and fragile. At night, you lie beneath threadbare blankets, muscles stiff and mind restless. The darkness presses in from every side, a vast and unyielding void. The long winter seems endless, a slow slide toward oblivion, where survival feels like a distant, fading dream. The winter deepens, swallowing the fort in cold and shadow that stretch endlessly into the grey sky. The sun rises later and sets earlier, its weak light barely touching the frozen ground. You awaken each day to a landscape that seems stripped of colour and warmth, the bitter chill seeping into your skin and settling in your bones like an unshakable weight. The cold is not just a presence outside, but a shadow that clings to every moment, draining strength and hope in equal measure. Within the fort, the air is heavy with silence, broken only by the soft crackle of dying fires and the faint coughs of those too weak to rise. Hunger has hollowed many, and sickness has left its mark on all. The faces around you are pale and drawn, eyes sunken but still flickering with the fragile spark of survival. Each breath you take is an effort, each movement slow and deliberate. Food is now a memory more than a reality. Rations have long since been reduced to nearly nothing. The settlers are sustained by grit and desperation alone, their bodies wasting away as the winter stretches mercilessly onward. You share small scraps with those nearby, knowing the kindness is all that remains of the community's spirit. The Powhatan, though distant, are never far from your thoughts. Their presence beyond the walls is a quiet reminder of the vast unknown and the precarious peace that holds. There is no longer time or strength for fear of conflict, only a fragile, wary coexistence hanging by a thread. In the council, the few remaining leaders gather in whispered tones, voices hushed but tinged with exhaustion. Plans to find relief or escape seem impossible, crushed beneath the weight of the cold and the relentless grip of winter. You sense their despair, a shared burden that settles over the group like a thick fog. Night brings a darkness deeper than the absence of light. You lie awake, the cold biting through the thin blankets, the sounds of the fort reduced to the faintest echoes of life clinging to existence. The long winter's cruelty presses down, but somewhere, beneath the frost and shadow, a fragile flicker of hope endures, quiet, small, but unyielding. The winter's hold has tightened into an unrelenting grasp, freezing the world in shades of grey and white. The cold no longer feels like a visitor, but a constant companion, settling deep into your muscles and bones. Each breath escapes in a mist that lingers briefly before fading into the stillness. You rise with aching limbs, wrapped in layers worn thin by time and hardship, moving through the frozen landscape that has become your home. Inside the fort, life continues in a slow, measured rhythm, each action deliberate, every moment a test of endurance. The fires burn low, their warmth barely enough to chase away the creeping chill. Faces around you are etched with weariness and quiet suffering. Hunger gnaws relentlessly, but it is the invisible weight of despair that presses heaviest on the heart. The sick remain in their cots, their breaths shallow and uneven. The healers move among them silently, their efforts a soft murmur of care in the cold stillness. Outside, the forest stands silent, a frost-covered fortress guarding secrets that feel both distant and unreachable. The fragile peace with the Powhatan holds, though the distance between the two peoples feels vast and unbridgeable in these harsh times. You hear stories of their own winter struggles, their lives intertwined with the land in ways the settlers can only begin to understand. It is a reminder that survival here demands not just courage but humility before the natural world and those who belong to it. As the days inch forward, you sense the slow turning of the seasons, a subtle shift beneath the surface of frost and ice. Though the hardship is far from over, there is a quiet resilience in the settlement, a stubborn, whispered promise that life will endure beyond the cold. In the stillness of night, you find yourself reflecting on the fragile thread upon which survival balances. The first winter at Jamestown has been a relentless trial, a harsh tutor in the realities of this new world, and yet, in the hearts of those who remain, a small, enduring hope flickers, quiet but unbroken. The first tentative light of dawn filters through a sky still heavy with winter's grey, casting pale hues across the frozen earth. The cold lingers, but beneath it there is a faint whisper of change, a slow, inevitable shift toward renewal. You stand quietly within the fort, feeling the brittle crunch of frost beneath your feet and the fragile warmth of hope rekindling in your chest. The survivors, few and weary, move with a cautious grace, their bodies marked by hardship but their spirits quietly enduring. The fort's wooden walls, scarred and weathered, stand as testament to the resilience of those who dared to carve a life from this harsh land. Though the winter's cruelty has taken so much, it has also taught lessons that will shape the future, a deep respect for the land, for its seasons, and for those who call it home. Around you, the faces of those who remain reflect a solemn strength, a silent vow to persist beyond the frozen night. The hunger, the sickness, the endless cold, all have been crucibles, forging a fragile community bound by survival and shared struggle. Beyond the palisade, the forest whispers in the wind, a timeless witness to the passing seasons. The Powhatan too endure, their lives intertwined with the land in ways the settlers are only beginning to understand. The uneasy peace between two worlds hangs in the cold air, fragile yet enduring. As the sun rises higher, promising the slow thaw of ice and the return of warmth, you feel the fragile pulse of life beneath the frozen ground. The first winter at Jamestown was a brutal passage, one that claimed many lives and shattered many dreams. But it was also the beginning, a harsh, humbling start to a story that would continue to unfold across the centuries. You breathe in the cold air, heavy with the scent of snow and earth, and sense that beyond this winter, beyond the hardship and loss, there is the slow, steady promise of spring, and with it, survival. As the story of Jamestown's first brutal winter fades into the quiet stillness of your mind, remember the fragile courage of those early settlers, their struggle etched into the frozen earth, a testament to endurance against all odds. Though the cold was merciless, it was met with a stubborn hope that quietly refused to be extinguished. Now, as you settle deeper into your own peaceful space, allow your breath to soften and your muscles to relax. Feel the weight of the day lift gently away, replaced by a calm stillness. Let the quiet courage of those long ago winters wrap around you like a warm blanket, comforting and steady. Rest well tonight, carried softly into dreams where history's whispers mingle with your own calm heart. Sleep peacefully, and may tomorrow greet you with gentle light and renewed strength. Good night.